Okay, so how does a movie become one of the most talked about films of the year before anyone has even seen it? Well, that's exactly what's going on with the new Supergirl movie. Today, we're going to break down this perfect storm of weird marketing and actors' polarizing comments and a debate that really gets to the heart of what we all expect from our heroes. Things really blew up with this one quote from the film star Millie Alcock. In an interview, she talked about what she called a weird ownership of women's bodies in fan culture. And boy, that comment became an instant flashpoint. The internet just exploded. But what's really interesting is that this wasn't even the beginning of the story. Not by a long shot. So, how in the world did we get here? See, this isn't just about one interview. It's a really complex story with a bunch of different layers. To really get what's happening, we need to peel each one back, starting with the very first problem, the marketing. Right, so the first big complaint, it had nothing to do with the actress. It was all about the way the movie was being sold to people. The first trailers and promos left a lot of folks feeling kind of confused and honestly a little let down. It just set a negative tone from the get-go. And the critiques of the marketing were surprisingly specific. Analysts were pointing out this really weird thing the studio did. They released trailers using the exact same footage, but they just swapped out the music. So one version would feel like this fun, upbeat adventure, but the next one, with different music, felt like a super dark, depressing drama. Nobody knew what kind of movie they were actually going to get. And, that confusion about the movie's vibe, it led right into people picking apart the character herself. People immediately started comparing this new version to the really popular, optimistic Supergirl from the CW show. And where that hero was a symbol of hope, this new movie version was being described by critics as, well, miserable, depressing, and even selfish. And these weren't just vague feelings. Critics were pointing to specific things, like how her main motivation in the trailer seemed to be just saving her dog, which some people felt was a pretty selfish goal for a superhero. The term insufferable coward was even getting thrown around, which really highlights this feeling that the new version was missing that core, inspirational quality fans expect. Okay, now let's get to the second thing that basically poured gasoline on this whole fire, that now famous interview with the movie's star, Millie Alcock. This is where the conversation completely shifted from the movie itself to the relationship between the people making it and the audience. So here's one of the lines that really got people talking. Alcock was asked about dealing with intense fandoms, and her response about existing as a woman in that space was seen by a lot of people online as a preemptive attack. Like she was suggesting that any criticism of the movie was automatically going to be because of sexism. The backlash was fast. Online, critics were saying, hey, hold on. Being the star of a huge movie means people are going to talk about your performance. That's just part of the deal. The argument was pretty simple. This has nothing to do with gender. It's just how entertainment works. And to back this up, people started bringing up other examples. Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman came up a lot as a female-led superhero film that fans were overwhelmingly excited about from the very start. The point being made was that the issue wasn't a female lead, but what was seen as a hostile attitude toward the very audience the film needs to win over. And this is where the whole thing gets way deeper and, frankly, a lot more controversial. All this backlash led some online analysts to come up with this really complex theory about our subconscious expectations and the roles male and female heroes play in stories. Okay, so let's unpack this. A theory started making the rounds online that says you can't just take a classic hero archetype, swap the gender, and expect it to work the same way. The argument is that audiences have these deep, maybe even subconscious expectations about gender roles that completely change how they react to fictional heroes. So here's how this online theory breaks it down. It claims that a flawed male hero can be a total slob, a real mess, but we still see him as a hero as long as he, protects people. But, and this is the controversial part, the theory argues that a flawed female hero gets judged way more harshly. According to this viewpoint, a depressed female hero is failing a perceived social duty to be inspirational, which supposedly triggers a negative gut reaction from the audience. And to back this whole idea up, commentators started pointing to these examples. They argued that actresses like Milla Jovovich, Angelina Jolie, and Gal Gadot became huge action stars because their characters, even though they were tough, still fit within what this theory claims are the audience's deep-seated expectations for a female hero.
All right, let's get to the final piece of this puzzle, which moves away from the movie's content and looks at the business of Hollywood itself. This is where people start speculating about the movie's troubled production and a potential studio strategy for dealing with a bomb. So, whispers started coming out from behind the scenes, painting a picture of a pretty rough production. These reports, coming from people who track insider Hollywood news, started fueling this idea that maybe, just maybe, the studio isn't all that confident in the movie they're about to release. Industry watchers started pointing to some major red flags. First off, a crazy high number of test screenings. We're hearing at least 8. Then, reports of at least 3 different endings being filmed and tested. Add to that a last-minute composer change and rumors that Superman's role got beefed up to help carry the movie, and you've got all the classic signs of what insiders call panic time at a studio. And all of this gave birth to what people are calling the flop insurance theory. The basic idea is that if a studio thinks they have a dud on their hands, they might actually welcome a public controversy. Why? Because it lets them create an excuse ahead of time. So if the movie bombs, they can blame it on a toxic fandom or sexism instead of just admitting they made a bad movie. This quote from an online analyst just perfectly sums up the whole theory. It's the story the studio can have ready to go. By framing the movie as a victim of a biased audience, they can try to sidestep any criticism of the actual film. It's a cynical strategy for sure, but some would argue a pretty effective one. So, when you put it all together, you can see the Supergirl controversy isn't just one thing. It's a true perfect storm. It started with some pretty fair critiques of the movie's marketing, which then got set on fire by the star's comments, and then completely spiraled into these huge debates about gender, audiences, and cynical studio moves. And all of this leaves us with a really provocative final question to chew on. When you have this massive disconnect between a piece of art and the audience it's made for, who's responsible? Is it on the creators to give the audience what it wants? Or is it on the audience to be more open to something new? It's a conflict that's really at the very heart of entertainment today.